What if I told you that one of the most iconic buildings in the world has been under construction for over 140 years, and it still won't be finished for at least another decade? Welcome back to UrbArchitect, where today we're diving deep into the extraordinary story of La Sagrada Familia, a building that defies every convention of architecture, engineering, and time itself. Imagine standing in the heart of Barcelona, Spain, looking up at towering spires that seem to pierce the heavens, each one telling a story written in stone, light, and faith. This isn't just a church, it's a living organism, a testament to one man's radical vision, and a project that has outlived its creator by nearly a century. The Sagrada Família, officially known as the Basilica I Temple Expiatori de la Sagrada Família, is the magnum opus of Catalan architect Antoni Gaudí, a structure so ambitious, so technically complex, and so spiritually profound that it has become synonymous with Barcelona itself. But here's the thing, when Gaudí took over this project in 1883, he was just 31 years old, relatively unknown, and inheriting what was essentially a traditional neo-Gothic design that he would completely reimagine into something the world had never seen before. To understand the Sagrada Familia, we need to travel back to late 19th century Barcelona, a city in the midst of profound transformation. Catalonia was experiencing a cultural renaissance known as the Renaixenca, a movement that sought to revive Catalan identity, language, and art after centuries of suppression. The Industrial Revolution had brought wealth to Barcelona, creating a bourgeoisie eager to express their regional pride through architecture and art. This was the age of modernism, the Catalan version of Art Nouveau, and Barcelona was becoming an open-air laboratory for architectural experimentation. Into this effervescent cultural scene stepped Josep Maria Bocabella, a bookseller and devout Catholic who founded the Spiritual Association of Devotees of Saint Joseph. In 1881, inspired by a visit to the Vatican, Bocabella dreamed of building an expiatory temple, a church funded entirely by donations, dedicated to the Holy Family. The original architect, Francisco de Paula del Villar, began construction in 1882 with a conventional neo-Gothic plan. But after disagreements with Bocabella and his advisors, Villar resigned just 1 year later. That's when fate intervened, and a young Antoni Gaudí was recommended for the job. What happened next would change architecture forever. Gaudí didn't just accept the commission, he consumed it, dedicating the last 43 years of his life almost exclusively to this single project. By 1914, he had abandoned all other work to focus solely on the Sagrada Familia, and in his final years, he even lived in his workshop on site, a monk of architecture, devoted to his sacred mission. So what made Gaudí's vision so revolutionary? Let's talk about design and concept, because this is where things get fascinating. Gaudí looked at the natural world and saw God's architecture, the perfect structures found in trees, bones, mussels, and seashells. He famously said, "The straight line belongs to men, the curved one to God." And he meant it. The Sagrada Familia is built on principles of ruled geometry, hyperboloids, paraboloids, helicoids, and hyperbolic paraboloids, shapes that occur naturally and possess incredible structural efficiency. Instead of traditional Gothic flying buttresses, Gaudí designed a forest of inclined columns that branch like trees, distributing loads naturally and organically. Walk inside the Sagrada Familia today, and you'll understand what I mean. The nave feels like stepping into a stone forest, with columns that twist and branch into the ceiling, creating a canopy of light and geometry that seems to breathe. Each column is unique, carefully calculated to carry specific loads, and they lean at angles that seem impossible until you understand the underlying mathematics. Gaudí used hanging chain models to determine the optimal shapes, literally inverting the forces of tension into compression, a brilliant analog computation method that predates modern structural software by a century. And then there's the light, oh the light. Gaudí obsessed over how natural light would enter the space, designing stained glass windows in a gradient of colors that shift from warm reds and oranges on the Passion facade to cool blues and greens on the Nativity facade, symbolizing the journey from earth to heaven, from birth to death to resurrection. The result is a space that transforms throughout the day, where colored light pools on the stone floors and climbs the columns like something alive, creating an atmosphere that is simultaneously spiritual, emotional, and architectural. The symbolism embedded in every surface is staggering. The building is designed as a Bible in stone, with 3 grand facades representing the Nativity, the Passion, and the Glory, which is still under construction. The Nativity facade, completed during Gaudí's lifetime and now a UNESCO World Heritage Site, explodes with life, covered in sculptures of plants, animals, and biblical figures, all emerging from the stone as if growing naturally. In contrast, the Passion facade, designed by Gaudí but built after his death, is stark, angular, and haunting, with gaunt figures by sculptor Josep Maria Subirachs that convey the suffering of Christ. The building is meant to have 18 towers when complete, 12 for the Apostles, 4 for the Evangelists, 1 for the Virgin Mary, and the tallest, 172.5 meters high, for Jesus Christ. Gaudí deliberately designed it to be 1 meter shorter than Montjuic, the hill overlooking Barcelona, because, in his words, the work of man should never surpass the work of God. Now let's talk about the technical reality of building something this complex, because this is where the story becomes almost unbelievable. When Gaudí died in 1926, tragically struck by a tram while walking to the site, only about 15 to 25% of the project was complete. He left behind some drawings, plaster models, and photographs, but much of his vision existed primarily in his mind. Then came the Spanish Civil War, and in 1936, anarchists set fire to Gaudí's workshop, destroying many of the models and plans. For decades, the project languished, with architects debating whether it should even be continued without Gaudí's direct guidance. But the work resumed, slowly at first, and then with increasing momentum as technology caught up with Gaudí's vision. Here's where it gets really interesting. The original construction used traditional masonry techniques, with stone carved by hand, a process that was painstakingly slow. But in recent decades, the construction has accelerated dramatically thanks to digital technology. In the 1980s and 90s, architects and engineers began using computers to reverse engineer Gaudí's geometric principles, reconstructing his intent from the fragments that survived. They developed 3D models of the entire structure, allowing them to visualize and test designs before construction. Today, advanced CAD software, parametric design tools, and structural analysis programs make it possible to fabricate complex stone elements with precision using CNC machines and laser cutting. Prefabricated stone blocks arrive on site already shaped, dramatically speeding up construction. This fusion of 19th century vision with 21st century technology is itself a kind of miracle, a conversation across time between Gaudí's analog genius and our digital capabilities. The materials tell their own story. Gaudí used local Montjuic stone for much of the early construction, but as the project has evolved, different stones have been used for different elements: basalt, granite, and even artificial stone where necessary. The structural system combines traditional masonry with modern reinforced concrete in ways that would have amazed Gaudí, staying true to his geometric principles while leveraging contemporary engineering to achieve what his generation could only dream of. The challenges are immense. Every new section must harmonize with what came before while interpreting Gaudí's incomplete instructions. Architects like Jordi Bonet, son of one of Gaudí's collaborators and later Jordi Folli, the current chief architect, have had to make decisions that balance historical fidelity with practical necessity. Should they strictly replicate Gaudí's style or interpret his principles in a contemporary way? It's a debate that continues to this day, with some purists arguing the building should have remained unfinished as a monument to Gaudí's genius, while others see completion as the ultimate tribute to his vision. The funding model is as unconventional as the architecture. True to its origins as an expiatory temple, the Sagrada Família has always been funded by donations and, in recent decades, by entrance fees from the millions of tourists who visit each year. It's one of the most visited monuments in Spain, attracting over 4.5 million visitors annually before the pandemic, and that tourism revenue has been the primary engine of construction. In a strange way, the building's fame has enabled its completion, the world's fascination with Gaudí's vision literally building the structure stone by stone. So what has been the impact of this extraordinary building? The Sagrada Família has influenced architecture in ways both direct and subtle. It demonstrated that architecture could be both deeply spiritual and radically innovative, that engineering and art were not opposites but partners in creation. Gaudí's use of natural forms and geometric optimization predated the organic architecture of Frank Lloyd Wright, the structural expressionism of Santiago Calatrava, and the parametric design revolution of contemporary architecture. Today's architects using computational design and biomimicry are, in a sense, following paths that Gaudí pioneered with hanging chains and plaster models. The building has also become inseparable from Barcelona's identity, a symbol recognized worldwide that draws cultural and economic benefits to the city. When Pope Benedict XVI consecrated it as a basilica in 2010, it was recognition not just of its religious function but of its singular importance in the architectural and spiritual landscape of our time. Yet the Sagrada Família remains controversial in some circles. Critics argue that the recent construction lacks the artisanal quality of Gaudí's original work, that modern techniques, while efficient, produce something too perfect, too machine-made. There's a valid question about authenticity. Is a Gaudí building still a Gaudí building when completed by others, using methods he never knew decades after his death? But perhaps that question misses the point. Gaudí knew he wouldn't live to see the completion. He once said, "My client is not in a hurry," referring to God. He understood the Sagrada Família as a multi-generational project, a cathedral in the medieval tradition where builders worked knowing their grandchildren might see the completion. In this sense, the continuing construction is itself part of the design, a building that evolves with each generation, incorporating new techniques while maintaining a coherent vision. The projected completion date has moved several times, from 2026, the centenary of Gaudí's death, now pushed to approximately 2030 to 2034, in part due to pandemic delays. But honestly, the completion date almost doesn't matter. The Sagrada Família has already achieved something more important than being finished. It has become a living testament to the power of vision, persistence, and faith, both religious and architectural. As we stand back and contemplate this extraordinary structure, what can we learn as architects, students, and lovers of the built environment? First, that true innovation often comes from looking not forward but around us, at the natural world, at the principles that have worked for millions of years. Gaudí's genius was recognizing that nature had already solved the structural and aesthetic problems he faced. Second, that architecture at its best is about more than function or even beauty. It's about meaning, about creating spaces that move us, that connect us to something larger than ourselves. Whether you're religious or not, stepping into the Sagrada Família is a transcendent experience, proof that architecture can touch the soul. Third, that legacy is built slowly with patience and dedication. In our era of fast design and faster construction, where buildings are often conceived and completed within a few years, the Sagrada Família reminds us that some things are worth taking time, that quality and vision cannot be rushed. Gaudí worked for 43 years knowing he wouldn't finish. That kind of commitment to a vision beyond your own lifetime is rare and inspiring. And finally, that architecture is collaborative across time. The Sagrada Família is Gaudí's design, but it's being built by hundreds of architects, engineers, craftspeople, and artists who have dedicated their careers to realizing someone else's dream. It's a reminder that we build not just for ourselves but for the future, and that our work will be completed, modified, and reinterpreted by those who come after us. The Sagrada Família stands today as perhaps the most extraordinary architectural project of the modern era, a bridge between centuries, a fusion of faith and geometry, tradition and innovation, one man's vision and the collective effort of generations. It's a building that shouldn't exist, that defies every conventional wisdom about how architecture is created, and yet there it stands, rising above Barcelona, reaching toward the sky, still unfinished, still becoming. When it's finally completed, probably sometime in the 2030s, it will have taken over 150 years to build, longer than any medieval cathedral. But it will also be a triumph, proof that in an age of instant gratification and planned obsolescence, we can still create something timeless, something that matters, something that, like Gaudí himself, refuses to compromise vision for convenience. So next time you see an image of those organic towers reaching into the Barcelona sky, remember that you're not just looking at a building, you're looking at faith made tangible, mathematics made beautiful, and one architect's dialogue with God translated into stone and light. And if you found this deep dive into the Sagrada Família as fascinating as we did, if you want to explore more iconic buildings and discover the stories behind the structures that shape our world, hit that subscribe button and join the UrbArchitect community, because architecture is not just what we build, it's how we understand our place in the world, and that's a conversation worth continuing.